Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. On Wisdom Wednesdays, I share tips on baking. And today we are going to have a continuation of what we did last week, and that's inviting Mark and Arnaud on for answering more questions on flour quality. Hi, Mark. Hi, Arnaud.
Hi, Lynn.
Again, if you haven't joined us in our YouTube video, please go there after this session and watch the YouTube video on flour quality where Arnaud made an amazing presentation on flour quality. As we know, flour quality is so important these days because we lack band-aids like potassium bromate and ADA, and we go on to natural solutions like enzymes, which are more dependent on flour quality. So what you need to do is really understand how to read your Mixolabs, Pharinograph, RVAs, whatever it is that you decide to use. And I brought on these two experts today to help you with either implementing a flour quality program or just to answer more questions. All right, so what I've done is I brought a couple more questions from our seminar that we did not get the chance to answer. And the first one today is actually for both of you. You know, would you think that the Mixolab someday could be used more readily as could more be used readily than a Pharinograph?
Well, I think that it maybe is time for that to develop over time because I believe that the Pharinograph has its limits in information. And from my experience in the past at times in the milling industry is that it's difficult sometimes to in terms of all the transparency and things of information to help the baker understand that the Pharinograph is only one indication of information, that you cannot look at it in isolation because it doesn't tell you the rest of the story. Whereas with the Mixolab, you get a more complete picture of all of the processes within the flour.
Yeah, what do you think?
I totally agree with what Mark is saying. What we can say, if we look at the Pharinograph, basically it's giving you water absorption, dough development time, stability, and related things. What we can see that the water absorption information is very relevant. It has something which is very useful for bakers because we can see kind of correlation. Then after, when it comes to the other parameters, if you look even standard method of what you can find online, you can see that there is so much variation on the information you get here that, okay, are you sure it's that a 5 minute is different from a 10 minute or from a 3 minute? Does that really bring you an information? Of course, it looks like if you have a longer dough development time for a baker, it's easy to project and say, okay, what about mixing time? Are we sure it really works like this? For what I've seen, I'm not convinced about that. So maybe the people listening to us have a clear understanding about that. So there is on the one side, the fact that we need a tool to agree between miller and baker about certain level of quality. That's what we are going to call specifications. And the Pharino can be a good tool for that, and as other ones. And this, because if the question is the Mixolab can be used more readily than the Pharinograph, for this, the Mixolab can do the same job. But again, if we do that, we are just reducing a new tool with a lot of features and a lot of potential benefit to what we have done for the last 50 years. And I think it will be more interesting to look at what the Mixolab can bring to bakers, because we have seen that in terms of predicting bread volume, for instance, or total score, that's analysis we have done, we've seen that the Mixolab is more powerful than the Pharinograph, definitely. And the reason is just because it gives you more information. It gives you information about what happened when you start heating the dough, about the protein behavior, and then after you've got the gelatinization, and then you can have the retrogradation. And it's not only on the batter, it's on the dough, it's on the real dough. And up to the point that you can even take your dough sample with the fat and whatever you put in, and test it on the Mixolab and have relevant information on your specific dough. And that's really where we want to go. We really want to work more with bakers and to have them testing this tool and look about, okay, how can I use this tool to really estimate what will be the final product? And maybe for some of them, this parameter will be important.
Yeah.
And for other one, it will be another parameter. And I'm convinced there is no one size fits everyone. And having this information, because you know that, for instance, that C3 value of the Mixolab, which is important for your process, then you are going to put that in your specification and require that from the miller. But it comes from the final product, your production line, your own production line, and you can put that on specification. And we did some studies on that, and we are sure that in that case, the Mixolab is a much better candidate because it provides more information, and so it can be more predictive of what's going to happen. I'm not saying it will be the ultimate thing. Working more with Baker, we will improve. We are just at the beginning of this new way of doing quality control, and I have to say it's extremely exciting to work on that.
So have you seen any kind of case studies where the absorption is the same, but then the RVA portion, like the starch heating portion, is different, and that contributed a huge difference in quality?
Yes, we can have that, and here we are speaking about the RVA, and again, the RVA is a really great tool when it comes to measure starch properties, because you're analyzing a batter or a slurry, very liquid dough, and of course you heat it up so the starch can gelatinize, swell, and do what starch does. But that's cool to know that, and of course if you want to do product based on starch, it's a good point.
Yeah.
But when you are considering baking products, we know that during the baking phase you are going from a phase which is directed or dependent on the protein, which are the first phase of baking, and then suddenly you go to a more starch-related phase during baking, and then after even retrogradation. So there is a balance between protein quality and starch quality, but also others. But that's the main polymers, of course. So having an information on what happened in a dough for the starch in the condition of limited water available is extremely powerful. Extremely powerful.
Which segues into my next question. Was someone asked about RVA, using RVA and assessing flour quality, and from what I'm hearing so far, it's only one portion of it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. As in fact, if you look at the Mixolab, I don't like to say that because that's not what I see it, but I know a lot of people see it like it's like a Pharinograph in the first part and the RVA on the second part. So it can be. There are some, of course, some similarities, but the first part is mainly driven by protein. So in that sense, it really relates to Pharinograph, because Pharinograph is mainly about protein and protein quality. And then after the starch properties, it's like the RVA, but the difference is that the amount of water is very limited. And of course, like in a dough, you have competition for water during the different component, between the different component, sorry. So between protein and starch and fibers eventually, but even on the starch, between damaged starch and undamaged starch. And finally, the Mixolab is providing you the whole information on how that react all together.
Yes.
And that's very powerful.
The RVA is fantastic for understanding starch damage and gelatinization properties and things like that. But because it's such a big slurry, in comparison to the dough in the Mixolab, you don't see the effects of the gluten formation, and as that then gets denatured in the cooking process, what is happening there. And so the Mixolab gives you, in that sense, a better understanding of the starch retrogradation properties that you have now, in terms of how well it is going to recrystallize and go stale, right? You know, it's basically going to help give you more shelf life information for breads in that respect, right? Or at least an understanding, some more control over what needs to be done, right? So yeah, it's much more relative to baked goods specifically. It is more informative, right? Whereas the RVA is for starch properties in general for all kinds of different food applications.
Right. So which brings me to this point, because correct me if I'm wrong, the Mixolab with Pharinograph with the RVA is going to be more versatile for processing, like gluten-free, and which is a lot of starches, and frozen dough, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very much. Yeah.
For
exactly.
gluten-free, that's certainly. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
For gluten-free, it's excellent.
Yeah. So there you go. I hope that answers your question, which segues to my next question. For frozen dough, frozen pizza production, we have an improver, but we still don't have a soft crust. We end up with a very fine crust, a thin crust, which hardens when you bite on it. We were advised to use a longer fermentation time, but it's not something we want to change. Of course, no, not every baker always want to put in more fermentation because of space constraints. What would you suggest to give a softer pizza crust with more volume?
Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to run the flour on the Mixolab.
Good point.
But no, seriously, you need to understand the quality of your flour. So if you have a flour that is too strong and too high in protein, you're going to always get this tough, chewy crust. If you want a crust that is more tender, then you need to probably be looking at a slightly lower protein flour. Not necessarily a soft wheat flour, but something that is, instead of 14, maybe in the 11 to 12% protein range, right? And then in using the instruments or working with your flour miller in terms of what is the protein quality there, you know, does it break easily in mixing? Does it mix out well? All these types of things. Then when you understand that part, then you could start to consider whether, you know, since you can't change fermentation, whether you want to do anything like adding enzymes or adding malt or something that is going to help give you a little more activity in the short period of time that you have to do what it needs to do to the starches and the sugars to help give you the right texture that you're looking for. So, you know, again, it kind of goes back to, you know, working with your suppliers, right? You know, working with the flour miller and understanding your flour quality, and having an instrument like a Mixolab, or even the alveograph in this, but the Mixolab is probably more appropriate for this, to understand the flour quality and aspects that you're dealing with, right? Like I believe I've mentioned this before, I've seen so often from Chopin, relative to the Mixolab, is the spider graphs that are produced that show you all of the different points in terms of where the strengths and weaknesses are of your particular flour, so that it matches up for your needs, right? And that is something that you need to take a look at.
Totally agree. I wanted to add one more point to that. To make anything softer, you need to put more air bubbles in there, okay? So if you can't afford more fermentation time or space, use chemical leaveners, use encapsulated baking powder especially. And you know what? The Mixolab can show that effect.
Yeah, and I mean, that's
because
what
it
all
can
the
show the quality, what happens when you put chemical leaveners in there. It will definitely make it softer. So good luck on that one. Okay, our last question of the day. There is plenty this comment is from the seminar, and it's complimenting both of you that you have awesome wisdom and knowledge to share. If somebody would like to learn more from you, where can they go?
They can go on our LinkedIn page. Chopin Technology has a LinkedIn page. If you are Alveograph or Mixolab users, we also have user groups on LinkedIn that we are going to put more active, because we need to put some more energy on that. You know that it takes time.
All right, but, yeah, I didn't know that. I'm going to join your groups now.
Yeah, sure. That's something. We have been a little bit silent, but now we have people for taking care of these. So yeah, that's something. Then after you can join us on our website, definitely. And of course, when the times will be a little bit better, you will find us a little bit everywhere in the world. To discuss with us on shows or congresses. We try to always be there. And of
so
course,
if we do go back to normal in 2021, Arnaud, which expo are you going to go to?
I'm going to travel US and see if I can go to AACC shows and ICC shows also, and AIOM. I've been missing a lot these kind of shows. So yes, I'm going to visit them.
Things will be. I know in the spring up until like May, June right now, everything is still virtual, right?
Yeah.
There's no plans for any real shows at this point.
There is a big one planned in Germany, I think, which is still planned, which is the IBA fair.
Yes, that's in October.
And we will be there. So we really hope to see most of you. And also, we do have people representing us in different countries, which is also very important when it comes to service and servicing the machines. And these are also people who knows a lot, and you can also contact them. Sometimes it's even better because that's the same language, so it can help. And if they have needs, they can come back to us. And of course, I don't want to say that because I would be afraid to receive too many emails, but of course I'm available if you want to join me. I will try to answer you as soon as possible.
Right. So do you have anything to add to that, Mark?
Absolutely. Be sure you are a member of Bakerpedia. It's free, always. Just sign up, and then that way you have access to the Baker forums. And we have all kinds of different groups set up within the Baker forums for basically subject matter conversations. And that's a great place to meet people, to share your ideas, share your questions and get them answered. And we have plenty of conversations that are going on there and continuing to get more and more momentum and activity in the forums. And it is a very valuable tool, and it's a great way to be able to meet people, not just within your region where you can go to physically to a show, but from all over the world, right? We have members from France, from the Netherlands, from the United States, from Canada, from India, from Nigeria, from Australia, New Zealand, Singapore. I mean, there's hardly a country we can mention that there isn't a member there, right? And so it's phenomenal. It's a great sharing experience, and that's where I would say we would welcome you with open arms, and glad to share with you, and appreciate the kudos.
Thank you, Mark. Well, thank you for coming on, Arnaud and Mark, and I appreciate your time on here today.
My pleasure.
Same here.
Bye.
Bye.